after the one of the Commission, because it's very much in correspondence. I will try to examine a little bit the question of the conditions for civil society engagement into European research on radioactive waste management. And for this purpose, I will just have a look to the successive projects that have taken place, and up to now the Joprad one, where I shall update a little bit with the current discussion that we have in order to make it possible to involve civil society. It's interesting to have a look to what happened since 10 years in the landscape of European research with a sort of a strong trend of re-engineering governance of EU research in parallel to the application of the Lisbon Treaty, with this idea of, let's say, reorganizing the research around the so-called European technology platforms, which is a new concept that was introduced by the Commission in the perspective of integrating public and private research to improve the added value at European level of research and to increase the leverage of EU investment to gain a sort of critical mass. And of course, it's an interesting idea in the industrial perspective. Sometimes it's not that easy for areas like radioactive waste management, which governance entails several independent parts that may or may not cooperate under certain conditions. And regarding the civil society, in parallel to this idea of gathering, grouping around industry, the research critical mass, there were also, let's say, the will to favor an informed engagement of citizen and civil society on research and innovation matters. It was well exemplified by the President's presentation, but it's not always easy to match those objectives. It's one thing to bring a critical strong mass around industry. Another thing is to have a sort of a transparent process. And those two objectives, as we will see, are not easy to operate. So what happened after this? Very soon in the area of radioactive waste management, because what I said is regarding the whole European research, not only Euratom. But then I come back to radioactive waste management, and what happened is that very soon the operators, they caught the opportunity to develop a platform which is called Implementing Geological Disposal Technological Platform, IGDTP. Maybe you've heard this name. And they have developed already in 2009 their vision report, and soon a final version of their strategic research agenda, and now involved into the deployment plan. However, this very strong movement and very efficient in a way was drafted essentially by operators. The executive group in the governance of the platform is composed of WMOs. And there were, in a way, setting aside people or categories of actors like TSOs, for instance, that didn't feel very comfortable with this. Although they were proposed to join a so-called mirror group, aside from the executive platforms of the LGDTP, and they didn't felt very happy with this position, being, let's say, like in the back of the car when the driving was not in their hand. And it was the same for the civil society. The GDTP attempted to set up a sort of a group of citizens, but soon they felt unhappy and frustrated because they didn't feel they were properly taken into account to take the wording of the Aarhus Convention. And some of us maybe will bring us testimony, but they withdrawn from those groups because they felt not comfortable into this. So what happened is after this, the TSOs started to think that they have to develop their own way. And they started a first CITEX project involving TSOs and regulators with the perspective at least to develop, maybe to develop their own platform, maybe, but with no precise idea. But the idea was to, let's say, gather TSOs and regulators at EU level and to develop and implement radioactive research, radioactive waste research, according to their own perspective, which is specific. It's not the same perspective to be the industrial implementing geological disposal. It's different from the perspective of the TSO. And also, they succeeded then to meet together 20 TSOs, regulators, and research entities for examining the opportunity also for a sustainable European network gathering TSOs and regulators. And it was already at that time with the idea to investigate potential interaction with civil society. It's interesting because this network was built with the perspective to examine the possibility to maintain access to Euratom funding for those TSOs, but they discovered that they had a lot to share, in fact, those TSOs at EU level. They discovered that they have to work together to develop trainings, to harmonize their practices. There was a lot more than the research. But they find out with this cooperation that they had with civil society, there are two main outcomes. There are many outcomes of this project, but I wanted to share with you two outcomes. For instance, this interesting vision of safety culture, of inclusive safety culture, where you see that, in fact, the safety of the radioactive waste management is a sort of a game with several independent players, such as, of course, at first the implementing function, but then the experting function working for and with the regulatory function. And on the right side, you can see the society function, which is a sort of additional level of in-depth safety, to put it in the wording of the nuclear safety. Another interesting vision is something which is a sort of vision of where the civil society should enter, play its role. And here it's very interesting to see that you have the several leverage of governance, the local one, the national, the European, the international, and of course the nuclear decisions are deeply intermingling those different levels. But the idea is to have at local level a first level of engagement and to help them to structure themselves at national level and at EU level. And this is, in a way, the reason of the creation of NTW, to be able to intervene at the different levels of governance. And here you have the long-term perspective of, for instance, geological disposal, with the several layers of the safety case review by the TSOs. So here, the idea, it's of course an ideal vision, but it's to enable the civil society to organize itself to be present at the different levels of decision. For instance, we discussed earlier with the network, Austrian network, the question of how to organize, for instance, at national level, the review of those national radioactive waste management plan. And this is, of course, enabled because now we have a directive which, in a way, forces every country to have its national plan, but there are procedures, and it's an opportunity for the civil society to put the foot in the door, and then to say, hello, I would like to review this plan. All this, so this is a sort of perspective, for instance, for NTW and in the radioactive waste management area, to enable our organization of the civil society to be present. And among the different levels, very interesting, is of course the question of the research, which we have at the European level. And out of this came out the idea of the second CITEX project, whereas in this second CITEX project, the idea was to implement this CITEX network. And here you have the different categories of actors interacting. And now you can see that in the first cycle, you can find a new structure for enabling participation of civil society with a double level. First level is a wide group of civil society organization at national one, and another group is more involved as partner in the project, more involved organization like Regional Environmental Center, Mutadis, a small research group which has link with civil society, Energia Club, a Hungarian NGO, Simlog, MKG, and this enables those groups to dedicate. Is that the end of my presentation? No, no. Okay. So this way to organize the work make it possible for civil society to have, I mean, people they can trust that are inside the system and that brings back information with regular workshop. And that is a very interesting system that we have tested into CITEX. And of course, you can find here FANC, which is involved here. And we had nice and very interesting cooperation, for instance, with Marina from FANC here, investigating the condition for inclusive safety culture, for instance. This is the type of cooperation that we had. And you find the TSO on the one hand, the regulatory authorities, and also this is also in the perspective of, at the request of the Commission, examining the potential for a joint research project. Joint research project that is at the origin of the so-called JOPRAD project. So just a word about this new format for interacting with civil society, which has proved to be very interesting. To have, on the one hand, a group of representative or European CSOs. We had about 35 organizations from 18 countries in Europe, and also interacting with CITEX along the project through CS experts involved as members of the project. It's very important because this is a way first for CS experts to get the necessary resources to dedicate time, and it's also a way to bring to the larger group of CSOs their expertise and the feedback on the expertise that is developed by the TSOs with the regulators. So we had regular workshops all along the project with this larger group. Now, coming to JOPRAD, here we have the question, shall we bring or elaborate a joint programming which would bring together organizations like WMOs, TSOs, and research entities. Of course, this is not obvious. I mean, immediately, for instance, civil society was a little bit cautious about this idea of bringing together those organizations. For instance, they saw the risk of TSOs being captured